to go.
Ready? All right, it's 3 o'clock, maybe 3:01, March 21st, and we're calling the meeting to order. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Division 1?
Here.
Division 2?
Here.
Division 3? Here. Division 4?
Here.
Division 5?
Here. We'll plan for water workshop, but we don't have any public comment.
Not have any public comment.
All right, so go to the reservoir operations modeling strategic alternatives.
All right, so I'm gonna slow start this a little bit. Nothing, Chip? Chris, can you go call? Did Doug go call? Yeah, so this, it's been a little while since we have met, and we have been busy doing additional modeling that was a result from additional information and input from the board, as well as some recommendations that staff provided last time. The additional modeling looked a lot at modification of carryover storage, as well as the ability to purchase PG&E water. As the board knows, we have a coordinated operating agreement with PG&E, and that governs how we operate our joint facilities. And one of the things we wanted to model was how would that water supply be impacted by potential climate change. We currently can purchase that water through contract for $40 an acre foot. So it's relatively cheap water. Outside of our current situation, which is a lot of interesting things that all happened at one time that has disabled us from continuing to bring water down from the upper region, that would typically be a reliable water supply. So I'm going to turn it over to Jared, and we'll start going through this new modeling results, and then we'll have a discussion about how we're going to move forward after we're done with this part. We didn't want to pile too many things on in one meeting, because it does get really intensive with talking about modeling results. With that, is there any questions before we get started? And members of the public, anybody participating at home, please feel free to use the chat function if you'd like to make a comment, or just raise your hand. And anybody here, please jump in anytime you like. And we have Jared here. He is the modeling guru, so he is best well suited to present this information. So I will turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Your mic on.
Is that better? All right, so as Jennifer said, we're going to talk about the model some more strategic alternatives. So today we're going to talk about the modeling assumptions, we're going to talk about the results, and then we're going to talk about next steps. Just as a reminder, every time we talk about this, we're using the ResSim reservoir operations model, takes inflows, consumptive demands, regulatory and practical considerations, and gives you flow storage generations. As a reminder, we picked 3 climate scenarios to use in modeling: a high bookend, a low bookend, and median. And we have 3 demand sets, right? We have our baseline demand, which is roughly equal to your kind of recent historic. We have a high demand and a low demand. We had paired the dry climate with the high demand, the medium climate with the baseline demand, and the wet climate with low demand. We ran some baseline studies, and we got these unmet demands, and then we went forward strategic alternatives to try and address those. And so the ones that we decided to model were an increase in raw and storage, 2 different sizes, Centennial Reservoir. Talked about those 3 last time. We did the extended irrigation season, just to see what that looks like. And then we went forward and did revised carryover targets and water purchases from PG&E. And so those last two are the ones that we focus on today. So the revised carryover targets, here in our first column, we've got existing carryover targets for all of your reservoirs. And then in the next column, we have these revised carryover targets. All of them are lower than previous, except for Jackson. Some of them are significantly lower, some of them are not. But overall, you went from carrying over 140,000 acre feet to carrying over 88,000.
Would it be helpful if we talked a little bit about where the existing carryover targets come from?
How we got the new one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Chip, do you want to come up and just speak to that briefly? Because they're, for a variety of different reasons, some are related to recreation, so we wanted to touch on that.
Okay, so jump in here, Jared, if I screw any of that.
Is that on, Chip?
No, and it's not, it
Oh.
Yep, it's on.
doesn't work that well anyway.
No, okay, you don't want to hear it. So the carryover targets in the existing column were basically an average of what our carryover has been year over year over year. As you recall, in this modeling procedure, we were shooting for, okay, dry climate, how are we gonna manage this? The model didn't take into account us maximizing our current storage through operations. What we did is we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, because this is our reservoir averages, can we work those more? Can we maximize them? Let's run those storage elevations down as low as we can to help meet our customer demand, which is what we would do in an average dry year. It's what we already do. Initially, the model didn't run that way. We sent these new numbers to the modeling to maximize what we had down to the bare minimums to give you the new numbers. Now, where did 88,500 come from? If you recall, our current minimum carryover target is 77,000 acre feet. What we did is we took that number and then added the new minimum workflows to that number to get 88,000 acre feet. So that new number now gives us all of our minimum in-stream flow requirements, plus a minimum amount for public health and safety for the next year, and then runs the reservoirs down to these elevations to hit those targets.
So the revised carryover targets are more reflective of how we operate now in a drought.
Correct. Basically maximizing our storage.
And the model is set so when we hit these targets, then no more water gets delivered to the customer. So no, that's a hard line in the model. When the reservoir hits this elevation, no more water's gonna go out of that to serve our demand purposes. Reason. That make sense?
Yeah, but what happens if one does go under, you can make it up with another one?
Well, that's not how it's laid in the model. Chip probably be able to.
Not enough flexibility to do that?
In the model?
Some do, some don't. There's interconnectivity between some of them, obviously, on the arm and no French water. But we actively manage those, and we can manipulate the numbers. Others, like Jackson Meadows, you know, if we have a dry year up on that side of the watershed, we'll run it down to its minimum and shut it off, and then do the rest. So those are pretty hard targets on the low end side of it. Some of them are controlled by dead pool or other flow obligations. So again, we tried to hit the bare minimums.
So the existing is more historical,
Correct.
and it's worked.
Yes. Well, to give you an indication of how well it's worked, our average carryover is somewhere north of 150.
Right.
So those numbers have worked for us, and they're actually probably higher than what we could and maybe should run it to in the future when we have a drier climate, drier condition.
But, so we have a drier climate in the revised carryover, then we're just kind of praying that the next year will be wetter.
You are making a gamble, for sure.
And it's a bigger gamble than we'd be willing to take.
Yeah, but you're playing on the long averages. You're trying to maximize your reservoirs for your customers.
Delivery.
The part of this that we're not talking about just yet is that at the end of that carryover target, that 88,500 acre feet is in November, okay? You haven't even experienced winter yet to get any refill yet. The likelihood of us getting zero refill is nil. I mean, we always get some runoff. So, well, like, one of our driest years is 77. I think we had 50,000 acre feet of runoff in 77. You add that to the 88,000, you're doing pretty good.
And then what you'll see next is Jared ran these revised carryover targets through the same model that includes the climate change hydrology. So you'll see the same modeling that reflects future climate change predicted hydrology, as we've done with all the other options.
And remember that just because it's a dry climate, doesn't mean it's the driest period. And so I think as you move forward and go through the presentation, you'll actually see that a wet year could actually impact us more than a dry year.
You said that you're operating to maximize storage, as opposed to what?
Maximize the use of existing storage. So we're exercising those reservoirs to their maximum potential, as opposed to only maybe utilizing only, like Jackson Meadows, you're only using about half of it in our existing operations. In the new revised operations, you're using almost all of that available water in Jackson Meadows. Does that make sense? Basically, we're draining the reservoirs down more in the new scenario and sending it to our customer base, counting on a refill next winter.
Okay. Seems to me it'd be more boom and bust.
There is that potential, but that is climate change, right?
But we have, I think as the point's being made, we have no margin. If you ended up with multiple consecutive years and you brought it down to the quote bare minimum, then you're SOL.
Yeah, you implement your job contingency plan to its maximum, and then you start making rationing.
So I think what will make more sense is when we look at the slides that show it being ran through the model, because I think that will be more reflective of how we would expect it to operate during a drought, under future climate change hydrology.
And you trust the modeling to be,
Well, you have to trust the modeling to the extent, if you trust the modeling to make predictions related to unmet demand under each of the three hydrology scenarios moving forward, you would want to use the same model to anticipate what any impacts to modification of carryover storage would be.
you know, my experience is with another irrigation district that does do this, and they hope to refill. And it can be, we have enough water till end of July. Well, around here, that's not gonna do us any good. So
That's a little bit different than what we're talking about. So let's get, and we're not talking about South Sutter operation of Camp Far West.
Portland.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't South Sutter. That was another one.
Oh, there's another one?
Yeah.
So, we plug those, carryover targets into the model, and, we're drawing down the reservoirs further, which moves more water over in summer and fall. Like, he had said, Jackson Meadows and Bowman, we're running water, moving it over to Bear River, Deer Creek, until it hits a carryover, and then it stops. And so the lower you have that carryover, the longer into the summer and fall, you're running that water out before you stop. And so we're moving more water basically every year over to Deer Creek, Bear River. That's what the model is doing with these, lower carryover targets. In addition, the model is doing, its calculations on allocations, right, the drought contingency plan, and it's looking at current storage and subtracting off your carryover target and saying that's how much storage we have to work with this year. By reducing that carryover target, the resulting how much storage we have to work with this year is higher, and so the allocation calculations come out higher.
So the South Yuba Canal can carry, what, 75 CFS, 150 acre feet a day, 4,500, and it can carry all this extra water?
No. In fact, I mean, South Yuba Canal has limited capacity to carry additional water. as you say. Well, a lot of it is going to Bear River,
We're sending it down the other arm.
but then we're maximizing, South Yuba Canal, and so we're maximizing South Yuba Canal, but then we're also doing that earlier in the year. So more of the water that's moving over in, say, May from Bowman is going to Deer Creek, less of it to Bear River. And then later in the year, when we were kind of maxing out that canal anyways, now we have more water going down to the Bear River to make up for that.
Okay. And remember, part of the issues are these limitations in our system to be able to physically get the water there. So if you had unlimited ability to move water through these different conduits, then the demand number would also look different.
Yeah.
Than what it is now. So it is included in there, kind of our maximums.
Does this, modeling reflect our current irrigation system
Current,
season?
yeah, current season.
Ideally, from your modeling, is it give you more flexibility to store that water in the upper division versus in the lower division? Or would you rather that it was in the lower division earlier?
You'd rather store it in the upper division, you have more flexibility to store water there.
As long as you can move it to where it needs to be.
As long as you can then move it to where it needs to be. You know, for instance, Rollins Reservoir spills almost every year. You're basically storing as much as you're gonna store
Well,
there.
unless there was more storage.
Fair enough, yeah.
That's my question, is, given a choice, would you rather have more water stored in the upper division? Or would it make more sense to have additional capacity in the lower division?
All other things being equal, you'd rather have more capacity in the lower division.
Thank you.
You know, partially because of these constraints
Yeah.
that, you know, because not only, not only,
Spalding has the issues that it's having right now.
right, yeah, you have the Spalding issue, you have, capacity on the South Yuba Canal, but also your capacity on the Bowman Canal, especially when you're looking at the high demand scenario, that limits you in the summer as well. And in fact, we found with these reduced carryover targets, sometimes Bowman can't get to its carryover because you're just maxing out the canal through the summer and that's not enough. Especially when you have increased water coming over from Jackson Meadows. Bowman just can't get to carryover with the capacity of the canal that it has.
Would it be fair to say, and this, I'm asking you to make an opinion, that even without net new storage, but just having the water stored in the lower division, the same water in the lower division earlier in the year, that would be beneficial?
Well, again, with the reservoirs you have on the Bear River, that water is probably just gonna spill.
No, I understand, but let's say we were to decide as a community to build additional storage. Take the argument out that we don't need more water.
Right, yeah.
Could you have a more reliable system with just the exact same amount of water captured today if it was stored lower?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's always this argument about, well, you don't need more water. Well, maybe we just need the water in a different place, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
you could definitely do more with the water you have if you had more storage in the lower division. So, once we've run the model, these are the, average November 1 storage levels, both with the current carryover targets and with the lowered carryover targets. Again, it's not every reservoir is hitting carryover every single year. A lot of times in the wetter years, you don't get to carryover. In the dry years, maybe you hit carryover in early September, but then you're still making minimum flow releases for a couple of months, and so you end up, a little bit lower. And so with these revised carryover targets, you're not actually carrying over 60,000 acre feet less.
Say that again?
So we dropped the carryover target by 60,000 acre feet,
Yes.
but the resulting storage does not go down by 60,000 acre feet.
less.
Yeah. Goes down by a lesser amount. Mostly because not every reservoir is hitting carryover every year.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
Averages.
yeah, right.
We have a quick comment.
Hi, you know, I was looking at this and it kind of finally dawned on me, what you're talking about is how much you have, but you're also talking about how much space you have. So you're actually increasing your storage potential by lowering your carryover. And so when we have this boom and bust, you'll have more space and you'll have moved your water. So you'll actually increase your supply of water because you've already moved it and you have more room to fill up your reservoirs when we have the heavy rains and all that stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, and instead of looking at how much storage, you could also look at how much capacity you have holding that. Thank you.
Yeah. And, to put a point on that, it doesn't take an extremely wet year to fill up your reservoirs. Right? And so even when you carry over lower, even a slightly wetter than normal year would probably fill everything back up.
Now, in below normal, above normal years, we're spilling a lot of the time by March.
Right.
How many years?
We did analyze that for the VA. What was it?
It depends on locations too, and timing, but,
Are we talking about Rollins?
yeah, I mean, if you're being specific to Rollins,
Yeah.
Rollins fills almost every year.
Almost every year, Rollins.
Very, very dry year that it doesn't. The other reservoirs are a little bit different. Snowpack, they're snowpack dependent, so
Scott's Flat?
more variable. Scotts Flat is also a small watershed and relies very heavily on the South Yuba Canal import, so a dry year, it wouldn't be unusual for it not to refill.
We still need a new spillway that we're not gonna use.
Yeah, that's not on the agenda for today.
You're in trouble. Go to comment.
Pointing out a $25 million cost.
We don't, gotta go there.
Good point, well taken.
I get the point.
For sure.
So if we model that, we still don't have an argument.
Here's the annual average unmet demand with these extended carryover targets. You are reducing your unmet demand by moving more water most years. But again, we're reducing our carryover target by 60,000. We're not getting 60,000 acre feet of supply out of it. Okay?
About a 20% difference.
And so then we wanted to look at the worst 3-year drought sequence, because we anticipated going into this that by lowering your carryover target, you may very well just be, in the first dry year, stealing water from the second dry year, or in the first and second, stealing from the third. And we're wondering, in a 3-year cycle, does it actually reduce unmet demands? And it turns out it did. That was a little surprising to me. This is why we do the modeling.
It did.
It did reduce unmet demands in a 3-year drought sequence. Yeah.
That's,
Okay, it's counterintuitive. That
Yeah.
would be interesting to hear a little bit more about what
Yeah,
that is.
yeah. And so, first of all, say that,
counterintuitive because every year you're drawing down closer to that minimum number.
I know, but it is counterintuitive.
On that third year, you're gonna be like, ow.
For us.
No, but like if you think about it, let's say you needed 10%, you're gonna draw it down below the average.
Right.
The next year, it's gonna be another 10%. It's becoming additive to where you're almost at dead pool.
Mhm.
so the first 2 years, we meet demand
You-
better, but the third year we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, probably the fourth year you can't.
Right.
so I guess first of all, I'll say that these numbers are the sum of the 3 years. This is not an individual year unmet demand. But what's somewhat interesting to me is with these climate change in the runoff scenarios, we're not actually talking about 3 critically dry years in a row. And in fact, for the most part, we go through these scenarios, we can't find 3 critically dry years in a row. It'll be maybe a critically dry, a below normal, and a dry, something like that. And so when you look at these 3-year sequences, like I said, a lot of times in the second year, you might have a below normal year. And so then you're filling everything back up, or mostly filling everything back up. And that's why I think that's why you're, doing better within the 3-year. Go ahead.
The last 3 years, 19, 20, 21, or 20, 21, 22, were not all critical dry years?
I don't believe they were all critical.
No, I don't think so either.
No.
It was the driest 3-year period ever.
Yeah, I don't know that we've had 3 critically dry years in a row.
Yeah, even the sequence from 87 to 92, a lot of those are dry years, not critically dry. And then, you know, I think maybe 2 of those years are critically dry and they're not back to back.
So maybe you haven't run this, but in that sequence, after that 3rd year, where are you with carryover? Are you at the new carryover goal, or below it, or substantially above it?
Right, that's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you at the moment. I guess we never sliced the data looking at that specific question.
How do you know that on that 3rd year you met all the demands? You had to know what the carryover was.
Right, so we went and looked at the highest 3-year unmet demand sum, and then in those same 3 years, we looked at what happened with the reduced carryover targets. In other words, with the model, we went and...
Go back
Yeah.
and then give us what the storage was, what the carryover was at the end of that 3rd year?
We can, yeah.
Perfect, yeah. That'll be helpful, because I think that will explain, or help illustrate what she was asking.
Help this end, yeah.
Well, I'd like to see it too.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So, Jared, I did want to clarify one thing that you had said. So, as far as ideal locations for storage, with everything considered, if there wasn't capacity constraints in the South Yuba Canal, the Bowman Canal, we would want storage up top, so we would have more opportunity to move water to
Yeah,
the side.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the point.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Dave,
Right.
ask your question again. I didn't-
So in consideration, if we lived in an ideal world and we could do a storage project wherever we wanted, we would want it up higher because we could move water both Scotts and down to
That's the
Rollins.
exact same question I asked him.
Yeah, but he was taking, I want to make sure everyone understands, there's consideration, as, the reason why he said lower is because there's capacity constraints with the South Yuba
Oh.
Canal and the Bowman Canal. I wanted to make sure everybody understood that. Because lower, you're basically picking one arm or the other, and then your area of benefit is smaller.
So let me ask your question differently. If you built the storage anywhere you wanted and alleviated all the capacity constraints, you would rather have it in the upper division?
Yeah, yeah, you know,
That's a major difference from the question I asked.
Yes.
right.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what his
Yeah.
opinion was.
Like she said, once you get to the end of the Bowman-Spalding Canal at Lake Spalding, you can run water into both directions, whereas if you build a reservoir, you're building it basically on one
Yeah.
arm or the other. In addition, you don't have the highest priority for water rights on the Bear River. And so, you know, even to the extent that the watershed is producing that water, you have to let PG&E take theirs first, whereas up in the Mountain Division, you have the highest priority on those streams.
Okay.
So, we also looked at, purchasing water from PG&E. As you probably know, there is a coordinated operations agreement between NID and PG&E on operating the intertwined projects. And amongst a lot of other things, it specifies that PG&E will allow you to purchase water from them, both on Deer Creek and on Bear River. Deer Creek, you can purchase it basically at the Deer Creek Powerhouse, and on the Bear River, it's actually along the Bear River Canal. So there's no mechanism to purchase water and get it to Combi and Combi Canal. But if you're purchasing water on the Bear River Canal, you can focus more of your Bear River supplies on Combi. So it's a little fungible in that way.
So I'm confused about these numbers. I thought the number was, in my memory was 15,000.
From PG&E? It depends on what type of year it is.
Depends on the water year, right?
And you have to do it all year round.
So was 15,000 one of the last years we talked to them about it?
I'd have to ask Chip,
I really.
because I have,
I
I
thought,
think you may be getting that 15,000, because that's how much we purchased during the drought.
During the drought.
The 2015 drought, we purchased 15,000 acres.
Oh, okay. And
So it is a variable allotment based on the
Right.
water year type.
Yeah, I knew that part. It was I thought that was the max we could ever buy, so.
No, there's
This
a,
is really good news.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be so much each month.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, you know, it specifies water that you can purchase, and here we've got the annual amounts, but the COA doesn't specify an annual amount. The COA specifies monthly amounts. So this is how much you can purchase in June, this is how much you can purchase in July. You can't take these annual months and just take it in summer, or these annual amounts and take it in summer. And so it's based on the Sac Valley Index. They basically designate dry years and normal years. Those are my terms. The COA doesn't actually call them dry years, but you have two categories of index. And so in dry years, the total maximum year-round can be as low as 25. And so these are the monthly allotments that it specifies you can take. You got the Deer Creek allotments on top and Bear River on bottom. But again, there's very little reason for you guys to be purchasing water in January, right?
We're
And,
already spilling, we have nowhere to put it.
right,
So if we wanted the 15,000 that Chip talked about from 2015, they're gonna give us a certain percentage of that each of the 12 months? Like, you gotta take it throughout the year?
well, like I said, in that year, over the 12 months, you probably could have taken 30, but when you guys wanted the water, it only summed up to 15.
Less.
So what's the term of that COA? So when does it expire?
So the one I have is dated 2018, and I do not know the
I think it,
length.
40 years?
yeah,
Makes sense.
I think it was originally a 30 with 2 10-year extensions. We'll double check.
I'm not too bright, so I'm still confused. If I want 15,000 acre feet of water from PG&E, and obviously I want them in November, which isn't gonna happen, do I have to take that 15,000, distribute it over?
No,
Like, am I
no,
gonna get water that I'm gonna spill anyway?
no, you
No.
get to pick and choose which months you're buying water.
Okay. This is just the maximum for each one of those months?
That's
given whatever the year profile?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Thank you.
And so these are the months that they specify in the COA. There's literally a table, you know, listing the months and these amounts. But then in dry years, they take the Sac Valley Index percent of average, look at the 50-year average, and that percentage is multiplied by these July through December numbers. And so even these July numbers, in a dry year, you can't get that much water. And so with these climate change scenarios, we basically develop, you know, when we built these climate change scenarios, we didn't build the entire Sacramento River. So we don't have, the Sac Valley Index for these climate change scenarios that were developed. And so we had to do a regression between the Sac Valley and the Yuba River, and then kind of, translate those Yuba River climate change numbers over to a potential Sac Valley Index. Regression's pretty good, though. So, and when we do that, we looked at the year type distribution, right? And so, historically, about 60% of the years go into that normal category from the monthly volumes we were looking at before, and 40% are in the dry category. And so here, for our wet climate condition, about 65% are the normal category. For our medium climate condition, it's about 50-50. And in that dry climate change condition, you're looking at about 70% of those years being in the drier category of purchase allotments, as well as, remember, we're multiplying those bar graphs by the percent of average, and those percent of averages are going to be a lot lower in the dry climate scenario.
Yeah, please.
This whole chart,
Yeah.
I'm not very smart.
You're with me?
I'm with you.
So we're running the model for potential climate scenarios 2022 through 2070. And out of those 49 years, we're looking at the percentage of those years that you are in the normal purchase allotments volumes, and which percentage of years you're in the dry purchase allotment volumes. And, so again, the drier the climate condition, the more often you're in those dry purchase allotment values.
What I took from that was the years that we most need the water, 70% of the time, we're gonna get the least amount of water
Yeah.
offered to us.
Yeah.
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 So how do you, historic distribution, 1920, 2021. So 1937 to 2007 was one of those 70-year historically high rainfall years. Did you adjust for that?
No, these are the raw values.
Well, that, okay.
Yeah.
Is-
Jennifer, what happens when this agreement runs out? Is there like a perpetuity thing that they have to come back to us? Like we make some 50-year decision based on this water being there. and then
Right.
Goes.
I don't know, Kian, did you pull it up?
Yeah, it is the term of the coordinated operating agreement is the term of the new FERC license.
That we don't yet have. So, FERC issues 30 to 50-year licenses.
So it's not gonna be like 10 years.
No, it'll at least minimum be 40 years. And then you also have to take consideration that our systems are so intertwined, it will be impossible to never have a coordinated operating agreement. What I think that the real risk would be is that they are able to spin off or sell their assets.
Generation.
And by the way, a draft order came out from the CPUC that denied, the divestiture from PG&E to PacGen of those non-nuclear assets. So that's, yeah.
That's good.
It's draft still, so don't get too excited, but that's good for us from a risk perspective, yeah.
Side note, this is the second time the COA has been renewed. So it stopped in 2013, we worked with PG&E, renewed it. I would imagine we'll have the same type of discussions in 40 years.
The good news about this particular agreement is they need us as much as we need them. We can't operate without each other.
Yeah.
The reason we exist is because they use a whole bunch of our water to make power.
Well, we crisscross, right? We go from them, us to them, to us to them, so, and then I just wanted to make sure, I think I might have heard one of your questions incorrectly. So this scenario with the water purchases under the dry climate, medium climate, wet climate change, these are just the bookend climate change hydrology scenarios under which we think those conditions would occur. Okay. And I think we do have a question. We have somebody, Jonathan Keene, he states, "I'm not very smart either." But here's my comment and question. In the matrix storage augmentation, I see that the 3 existing reservoirs, Rollins, Combi, Scotts Flat, have already lost storage capacity ranging from 11 to 50%. The cost of sediment removal to restore capacities to 100% is deemed not feasible. My question is, in considering the life cycle cost of adding any storage capacity, for example, new dam or raising the height of an existing dam, shouldn't you also include the cost of remediating future loss of capacity and or the inevitable cost of the eventual, still can't say it, decommissioning, removal of the dam at the end of its expected life? Yeah, and those are good comments. So, there's a lot of financial consideration that goes into all this, and I know Director Calder has brought this up. What the next kind of step is to really start diving into, we're not gonna be able to get exact, because we don't have exact engineering studies, but we're in the strategy alternatives matrix as all those columns for environmental costs. We're gonna start flushing all of that out for these options, so we can really start kind of making a better comparison. So expect that next time. I didn't want to pile everything onto one meeting with more modeling, so that will be the next meeting. Good question, though, Jonathan.
So I guess one last thing to add here, on the Bear River, the water that you would be purchasing, the buy point is where they're turning it out of the Bear River Canal. In other words, PG&E owns the water when it's running through all of the powerhouses, right? And by the time they're selling it to you, they're basically done with it. And so I think, as Jennifer said, the likelihood of them pulling the rug out from under this is low, because to them, it's,
Yeah, what are they gonna do?
they already used it, yeah.
Okay, I have to ask a question. I'm enjoying the club. So I'm just trying to understand the drawing down of water to like the minimum and how that's going to affect, you know, water deliveries in the future. And I'm assuming that part of the decision is to how far you're going to draw that down. I know the last couple of years we've had a lot of rain and a lot of water spilling, but I remember not too long ago that Scott's Flat Lake was drawn down pretty low, and we were all on water rationing. So my question is, have you looked at that scenario, and if you had drawn the water down, you know, to the minimum, what would have happened under that scenario?
Oh, going backwards to real hydrology, or?
Yeah, like to real, like, you know, I remember we were pretty severely water rationed, and I remember Scott's Flat Lake was pretty low.
Yep.
So what would have happened if you, prior to that event, if you had drawn the water down and we didn't get the rain? So.
We'll have to, the question's difficult to answer because those existing carryover storage targets that we showed, those are hard inputs into a model. The reality of how we have historically operated the system has been to much lower targets. So we would have to go back and look at the historical hydrology and see, what year was that? I don't even know.
It wasn't too
It
long
wasn't too
ago,
long ago.
maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I mean,
Maybe 5.
so my concern is, you know, that was a real event not too long ago that we were under water rationing. And if you had drawn it down to the minimum, like, what would that have looked like during that period of time? Because I think there was like 2 or 3 years of.
You're right, I remember that.
Yeah.
It's 30% rationing.
So, I mean, that's my question. I'm just trying to understand, like, what's the impact here of drawing the water down to bare minimum?
We'll have to look at,
2021.
It's 2020.
Yeah, what's that?
I don't know how easy the answer's gonna be without sitting with money to get it.
Hopefully I can explain this. The existing reservoir operations, the way we plug them into the model was the average year. Okay, in dry years, we run it below those numbers. And in fact, during the 2015 drought, Scott's Flat was well below the numbers that were input into this model. We ran it down low because it was dry. We needed to use that water. The proposed change is doing exactly the same thing. It's going, in a dry year, we're gonna maximize the use of that reservoir, just like we did in 2015, to meet our customer demand. So hopefully that explains it a little bit better. It won't be a major departure from how we ran it during the last drought.
And we can see what the elevation of Scott's was during that time period, because though, like I was saying, the existing carryover that we used in the model originally, those are not what we historically have ran the reservoirs at.
I think Barbara's point is, if you have less storage up high, then there's less feeding into Scott's Flat. And that's the thing that really makes me nervous about that is. I just can't get my head around. Yeah, how does it actually play out if you are at a real low level in Scott's Flat and you don't have that buffer up above, then I just like to see it played out in a scenario.
So you'll see it in the carryover storage and the unmet demand summary tables that are coming up. But I think what we're not doing a good job of explaining is we do already run the reservoirs like that. So you're gonna see under climate change conditions, but we've already, like Barbara stated, we've already seen it under historical conditions.
Yeah, but she also said that she has rationing. So are the conditions that get us to this point, does that put us in a drought condition where we've already implemented RES?
Yeah, the drought contingency stages are included in the model.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quicker.
So that's the answer, Barbara.
Yeah.
They're gonna ration you when they,
Yeah, you're gonna get rationed and it's gonna drop.
everyone.
Yeah.
We're still gonna have some water.
Yeah, let's get to the coming up slides. I think it'll be helpful.
Moving right along.
All right, so, to model all of this, we took a look at, the Sac Valley Index, right? We, figured out the dry years, the normal years, percent of average, so we got, a 49-year time series of how much water you conceivably could buy each month. And then we took a look at the baseline modeling results and decided, okay, when would we purchase that water, right? Again, you're not gonna purchase water December through March, you're not gonna purchase water in wet years, et cetera, right? And so we looked at years that you're taking, shortages, and not necessarily just the months that you're taking shortages. In other words, sometimes we're buying water in May, even though shortage didn't come till July or something like that. But, we looked at the years in which these available purchase volumes could be used to address the unmet demands. And so the result from that is that while, theoretically, on average, you could purchase 40,000 acre feet, we have you purchasing 4,000 to 16,000. And that's, 4 in the wet scenario, 10,000 in the median scenario, and 16 in the dry. But again, that's on average, and so like a lot of wet years, you're not buying anything, and in a lot of dry years, you're buying a lot more. And so here we have, each year of the 49 years that we modeled, for each of the 3 scenarios that we modeled, how much water, we determined would need to be purchased. And so in the wet climate scenario, you're purchasing water in about 40% of years, and, 10% of those years are even, pretty low volumes of water, right? But in the dry scenario, basically we see you're taking unmet demands just about every year, and so of course you'd be buying water just about every single year, because that's the dry climate crossed with the high demands.
So is this to get us to full deliveries or to get us to some sort of drought condition?
So a lot of times your unmet demand is more than what you could conceivably buy. And so it doesn't get you to full deliveries.
Is there a way to graphically show that in here?
We could. We don't have it, but, yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around how to,
Yeah.
because I actually, from Barbara's question, it'd be nice to see as we're drawing down those reservoirs and getting to this new lower carryover limit, when does the drought conditions kick in that we're gonna start asking people?
Unfortunately, the drought contingency plan conditions of recent years have not kicked in per the drought contingency plan that's part of the urban water plant that you're supposed to have. It has been a, emergency regulation that's come down from the governor. So he will say, everyone implement stage 2, or everyone implement stage 3. So the drought contingency plan is part of the urban water management plan, and that's what has the triggers for when the stages get implemented. But of recent time, it hasn't been per your plan, it's been per emergency declaration by the governor.
Whether or not it actually has application here.
Yeah, which has been difficult because we have lately been in an area of the state that seems to get fairly good precipitation while there are drought conditions everywhere around us.
And we'd be going, oh, we have lots of.
Yeah, we've had to implement drought contingency plans when we have not had a drought here.
Right, I remember.
But it could be the opposite too. So going to Trevor's point, there could be times that we implement drought contingency, even though the governor may not be requiring it.
So then you'd implement it per the triggers in the plan.
Right, but that goes into your question.
I don't think that's the only way.
Oh, you could just
Breaks.
yeah, if something breaks, like, there will be other times such as under what we're under now, where we're asking for 20%, yeah, definitely. Those are all such unique conditions based off of what time of the year something happens, how much precipitation we're expecting, how long we expect an outage to last. So, you know, the planning for that is more on a micro level.
We have 6 stages that correspond to the states.
5 stages, 5 stages.
Okay,
You're required to have 5 stages.
okay. So one of those if we do have a unplanned outage.
Yes, you can go to one of those if you have an unplanned outage, but we treat it more holistically
Right.
than what the plan says.
Right.
We have different issues.
Remember, Chip?
Yeah, but you also have to understand, and I think Jared touched on this well before, is not only, so in this particular situation where we are having an extended outage related to PG&E infrastructure maintenance, we're not just talking about how much water we have, we're also talking about how we move that water within the constraints of our existing system during a specific time of the year. So we have to go and plan for when we have rain coming up. What is that gonna do to our calculations? Then, if we think the temperature is going to start increasing at a specific level, what does this historically do to the amount of runoff we're getting? How fast is snow melting? How long can we rely on natural runoff? And then we have other conditions, where we have to start pumping, and we have canal capacity limitations, we have pump limitations. So it's a more holistic than, we're only gonna implement stage 2. Yeah.
Let me ask my question differently instead of asking you to put another line on here. You, in the model, you're buying as much water as you can from PG&E in those years where there's unmet demand at the times that it makes sense to do so. And it's not getting to the 45,000 or whatever because it's not available to us when.
It also could be that you don't have room for it,
That's a good point.
because Rollins, if it starts spilling so early, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
we need an animation.
Of all the reservoirs, like a big 3D watershed, that was a good
I
idea.
just wanna see the water moving from side
Can NVIDIA, donate that to us?
AI project?
I could probably get you into the Inception program.
I like that, man.
So, we had run these revised carryover targets. We, looked at the water purchases, and then we looked at the both combined. Often, you're using them together to just reduce unmet demand further than one or the other. Sometimes, in some situations, the revised carryover targets, you have to purchase less water. Right. And so here, again, we're looking at the worst 3-year efficiency in each of the scenarios. And so now we're gonna run through some of just, result summaries. And so here, we're looking at the wet hydrology, low demand scenario, both the existing condition and then these 3 strategic alternatives that we ran. You can see that the combination gets you almost back to full deliveries. When we looked at the median hydrology baseline demand, doesn't get you to full deliveries, but you can see, you know, they're just about additive. We look at the dry hydrology, high demand, and that's a tricky scenario to try to combat. But we get an extra 11,000 acre-feet of deliveries with the combination. And so here, if we look at the unmet demand in the existing condition and then these 3 strategic alternatives, you can see how much they're reduced just in the context of the unmet demand in the existing. We look at carryover storage. Obviously, water purchases aren't going to affect your carryover storage all that much, and so basically it's the revised carryover gives you lower carryover storage. There is a small effect of, we're gonna purchase some water, so maybe allocations went from 80% to 90%, and so we end up drawing our reservoirs down because down a little bit further because the drought contingency plan is in 10% increments. And so if you're buying, 9% of your demand, if you're gonna kick up 10%, and so then a little bit of that is gonna come out of additional storage.
I had a question on the previous one, excuse me, going back.
Sure.
So dry hydrology, high demand, but a lot of our canals are at max, so we can't deliver any more water. Did we take that into account?
Should be reflected in the
Yeah, it was
numbers, right,
reflected
as
in the original
unmet
model.
demand.
Okay, that's where it shows up.
So, put it this way, the model that we're talking about here simulates, South Yuba Canal, the Bear River Canal, Bowman Spalding Conduit, the major, canals that are moving water around from one area to another, right? The smaller canals that are actually getting the water to the customer, those are handled in the, demands model, right? And so when they are forming these demands, I'm pretty sure they took those canal capacities into account. In other words, even those high demand, that is considering the capacity of those smaller canals.
Yeah, remember, it took into consideration of the capacity of the canal is also topography, for example, and elevation, so that when they were adding on parcels over the time period of the model, they're not adding on parcels and demand associated with those parcels that would be physically impossible for them to connect to an existing canal. Gus had a question for you, Jared. How much do you think projected changes in runoff patterns, earlier snow melt, pulse, could influence these purchase estimates? Historical months where water was available for purchase may not be the same month where availability in the future. I think that was shown in your exceedance plot.
Yeah. And, as we discussed earlier, these monthly amounts are locked in for a few decades, and when there's a new one in 40 years, it probably will have a slightly different pattern on the months that they can give you water, right?
I have a question. Earlier, I heard you say, this is going way back, sorry.
Sorry?
I heard you say that we could purchase water from BG on South Yuba Canal, Deer Creek, right?
Yes.
I'm confused about whose water that is and where it
We
goes.
own it.
What's that? They own that water?
No, Deer
No.
Creek,
They would put water that they own into Deer Creek.
everything goes through Spalding, then goes.
Right.
Right.
So we
Or you
buy
come off
water,
above,
we
too.
buy some from them at Spalding and run it down.
It's our water or their water.
Yeah. And, yeah, and so in the, agreement, it says that as long as PG&E owns the Deer Creek Powerhouse, they'll sell it to you as it's coming out of the powerhouse, right? And so they'll put the water that you have been running through the South Yuba Canal, they'll put some of their water on top of it, although in the summer, there's limited ability for them to do much of that. And then once it runs through the powerhouse, you can then get it. And after they sell you the Deer Creek Powerhouse, they'll basically be selling it to you right at the top of the canal, just at the downstream Spalding.
That was my confusion, was what happened to the sale of the powerhouse?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And, while the agreement has different volumes for before and after you buy it, basically when you account for losses in the canal, when you get to the Deer Creek Powerhouse, it's basically the same volume. I think we figured it's within 1%, the same volumes once you account for those losses.
There are some significant losses in the South Yuba Canal.
Yes.
It's over 100 years old.
Leaks.
And
Have you ever walked underneath it? It's like a leaky roof. Yeah, it's like a leaky roof shower.
Yeah, we model a 14.5% loss.
I was gonna ask that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought we had, internally, everything had agreed on a 50% loss, but it was 14.5?
Yeah, 14.3, and that is actually specified all over your COA.
Oh, okay.
Both in terms of the purchases, but also just in terms of how we're going to account for the water. Everything assumes 14.3% loss.
Okay.
That's for those bigger canals under the COA, right? The small canals, we were using the 15%. So
That what
they're
I'm
two different,
remembering, okay.
yeah, so the demand model included that 500.
So do we have a number of how much that is per year?
Oh, just on the South Yuba Canal? Yeah, I mean, we didn't calculate it, but yeah.
Right.
Remember when we were going through the acquisition with PG&E and they had to do the hydraulic design capacity test? And I can't, what'd they put them up at the top?
104.
I think it was 104, and they got the 85 at the bottom. That's right. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Higher,
it could be higher.
20%.
yeah.
Don't quote me on those numbers, I'm pulling that from my head, but it was something like
I
that.
had never pondered that amount of, when we're talking about stored water, have that much going out of that canal.
Right, so carryover targets, the drier the climate scenario, the more your carryover drops, just because all the stuff we talked about our lower targets. All right, and so then we looked at generation results. Generation is, somewhat, reduced with the water purchases and somewhat increased with your carryover targets. You know, the revised carryover, it makes sense, the generation would go up a little bit just because you're moving more water throughout your tunnels. Here we have some summary tables. But
So on the wet climate, well, I don't, yeah, down, some parts would be more usage of water because they're planting more, but we don't have that up here as much. They would plant more acres in the valley. Here they don't.
The reduced generation because of the water purchase is that we're not drawing down, so, reasoning?
no, it's because with the water purchases, running more water to Deer Creek, which bypasses all the Bear River Canal powerhouse.
Oh, it's just the locality where the water's going.
Yeah, the bigger powerhouses are on the Bear side, the smaller ones are on the other side.
Okay. Okay, told. That's helpful.
So, again, we've provided, summary tables. I don't know that we need to go through all of these individually, but, they're there for everybody to look at. But again, you know, we have increased deliveries in all of these scenarios that are, modest but real. We've got the baseline demand in green and our dry hydrology high demand.
Now, are your exceedance numbers, is that what these are on the result summaries?
That's a percent change from existing conditions.
So the change in the unmet demand, when you combine the water purchases with the, here you get really clear to
Yeah,
percent.
yeah, right. And so now we're wrapping up all of the strategic alternatives that we've looked at and comparing across them. So here we have deliveries in the wet hydrology low demand scenario. Those numbers are, again, the change from existing condition. We have the median hydrology baseline demand. The dry hydrology high demand.
Sorry, this is my end of the table, or I'll speak for myself.
Our end of the.
Our end is still having a little bit of difficulty. But, right now I'm looking at the dry hydrology, high demand delivery. So I'm curious, when you compare the Rollins 50 acre feet raised and the Centennial, are we saying that if we were to build additional storage, in this case, we were calling it Centennial, that all we would get is an additional 18,800 square feet?
Acre feet.
Acre feet, I'm sorry, yeah, thank you, acre feet. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah.
And it still doesn't meet demand.
Of deliveries, but it still doesn't meet demand.
But remember, this is high demand, that's a huge increase.
No, I know it's a
Huge
huge increase, but I mean, that's kind of why I wanted to look at it this way, because, you know, when you compare, I mean, this could be apples to oranges, and where my head is, but we compare the money for any of these options versus what we get in these really dry, high demand, there's no bang for the buck.
Well,
Is that an accurate?
before addressing on deliveries, Centennial is just the siting of it, it's lower in the watershed, it just has a smaller area of benefit. We're raising Rollins, can
Has
reach.
a larger, yeah,
Yeah.
because you can get the Bear River Canal, so it has a greater benefit to a wider area, correct?
It helps more.
For those three in the middle, Rollins 10, Rollins 50, and Centennial, you're not also including the revised carryover and the water purchase,
That's right.
You could layer it.
because that seems to get you pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
I don't think they're perfectly additive.
It's not linear.
Well, yeah, and, you know, especially for these dry scenarios, a lot of your, unmet demands are on Deer Creek. And so as we've been talking about all afternoon, you just don't have the canal capacity. If you built Centennial, you got all the water you need down there, even though it's below Bear River Canal, so it's not actually all the water you need. But there's just no capacity to move all of your other water over to Deer Creek to make up for that.
And it's a perfect example of what we're going through right now with PG&E. So based off of our estimates, we're gonna be fine if we tighten up operations, move some water around, ask for voluntary reductions. But there is still an issue on the Scott's Flat side, because the Cascade Canal comes off above where Scott's Flat is. So we have to back pump it back up, and then there's capacity limitations in the DS Canal. So that side would be impacted more. Even though both sides are gonna draw down storage, this side, because of capacity constraints within the infrastructure, is gonna be more problematic on the Deer Creek Scott's Flat side.
What is the capacity of DS Canal? How much?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's 100.
No.
100,
Sounds about right.
and how much goes then to Elizabeth George and, I mean,
Good news, it has variable all the time of year.
right. But almost all of it would have gone to irrigation.
Yes.
Is there a realistic, realistic means a lot of things. Is there an option on that side to improve?
Capacity?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk about this more. I mean, one of our biggest risks is the South Yuba Canal.
Right.
That's what we've been hearing all afternoon.
Yeah, it has a capacity issue, it has a infrastructure reliability issue that's major. It is one of, I think, is a bigger risk to this district than,
Anything else?
yeah. And it's also just in a very, very fire-prone area.
So off the top of your head, the most realistic thing, if money was not an object, would be like a tunnel,
Yeah, if
Getting rid of this thing.
if all of a sudden we won the major lottery and you said you could go fix the number one thing that is the biggest risk keeping you up at night.
Back one extension program.
Well, it's been a long time since I've heard that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Shoehorn?
Yeah, it would first be in South Yuba Canal for sure, and then start looking at
Would you go
storage
as far as saying,
and Doug's tunnel. Doug and I would build our tunnel.
would you go as far as saying, in your opinion, that building additional storage on the Bear River side is secondary to fixing the capacity issue?
It's the capacity issue and the infrastructure reliability issue. My fear is that there's a huge fire and it takes out a significant portion of that elevated flume. It's very costly, but you could likely get FEMA emergency repair dollars. It's the amount of time that it would take to fix it. We'd be in big trouble.
Well, and your conversation that we're losing somewhere between 14 to 20% of our water going through that system lends more justification to invest in that versus, that's a lot of water loss.
The tunnel is extremely expensive.
Well, it might not have to be a tunnel.
I would love the tunnel. I'm all for the tunnel.
Big holes.
This
Yeah.
infrastructure wants to tunnel.
This is,
So
what's the biggest tunnel?
Water slide.
Also,
$500 million to raise wrong.
That's my point.
Okay, well, I at least think we should cost out that among the other things.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think that's what really the next phase of this conversation is, because these are complex conversations, right? And so you really need to understand kind of, because we also have Scotts Flat Spillway, Chicago Park, we have other powerhouse issues. We have a new FERC license coming up. We have the South Yuba Canal. So you have to kind of look at everything. I'm not saying that storage wouldn't be great. If I had all the money in the world, I'd do it all.
and I think part of the capacity thing, that's gonna come out, that's gonna get vetted through our raw water master plan. We'll be using this information when we come back with raw water master plans and identifying what the new capacity should be to meet demands from these different locations.
Get rid of the bottlenecks,
That'll be part of that.
address
that
infrastructure
process.
reliability.
Because even in the driest year, Centennial only increases deliveries by 19,000. And why would you build
Why
that
would
big
you
of
do
a,
that?
big,
A monster,
that big of
yeah.
reservoir? All you're doing is gaining that much.
Something else hasn't happened. And I mean, in this year, it would be super beneficial to have that there, beyond the 18,000.
It would certainly, if Centennial was built right now, it would certainly help with the situation we're going through, for sure. It just only helps a smaller segment of people, yeah.
As you'll see on the next slide, it really impacts your carryover increases.
Your carryover goes up a lot because you don't ever draw it down.
Right,
Right,
Yeah.
on that side.
because it doesn't have as many places to go.
No, it just has a smaller service territory, yeah.
So here we're comparing the unmet demand across all the scenarios. It goes back to, the conversation we've just been having in terms of those, the dry hydrology, high demand. So here we're looking at carryover storage. As Jennifer just alluded to, Centennial gives you a high carryover because it can only service part of your service area, and so it's not being fully utilized.
And it doesn't save a whole lot of water that's being transferred to the site, does it? I remember, 1,000 to 3,000 acre feet a year?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
I think I remember, it was about 3,000 when we looked at those other models.
So Jennifer, can you, just summarize the issues with water transfer? Because that is an issue that gets raised regularly. If we build Centennial, then we could sell water, and, I think it's important to reflect on the reality of that being able to happen.
Yeah, there's transferring water is extremely complicated. It's probably one of the more bureaucratic things that you can do in California. You know, since we've been here, we've come close once and couldn't get it done. So the first issue is we have a hard time getting it to the Delta to sell it because we have no direct path. We have to go through someone. That someone would likely be South Sutter. There are restrictions within the Bear River during certain months of the year because there are environmental regulations that do not want you to put flows in, so they attract salmon up into the Bear River and get stranded. So and there's also capacity issues. So with all those issues involved, you're left a very tiny window. So you have to find a year in which the delta is not in excess, that there's not too much water in the system, that people need water, that you can get water out after Rollins is filling and before you have to be out of the Bear River.
Yep.
So you have to go through environmental analysis, get all your, and we do have an environmental document that we can rely upon that is expiring, so we'd have to do an addendum on the environmental document, but you have to try to get the water through in a very specific amount of time, which in some years is extremely challenging. The one year we were very close to being able to do it, we just couldn't make it happen within the time frame. It was impossible to get it done. That's why we did so much work on trying to get everything teed up and understanding all the issues so we can go when we can go. But as far as, I do hear a lot that you can sell the water, which you could, and yours you could get it worked out. You could absolutely sell the water. And, you know, you can make a decent amount of money out of it. You could, in a really, really good market, and you have enough water to sell, you could make probably $10 million. The issue is that you can't finance projects off of a speculative water sale. So when you go through municipal or public financing and do bond issuances, you have to go through underwriting. And ever since the housing market took that big crash, 2008, 2013, a lot of public agencies at that time, they used to issue municipal bonds and underwrite them based off of future fees they were going to collect from future connections to the system. Once that happened, a lot of bonds had significant debt repayment issues. So now what the bond underwriting agencies make you do is you have to put a specific layer within your rate model that collects enough revenue to pay that debt service regardless of whether you're receiving any revenue from what they would consider to be speculative. So we wouldn't be able to go through bond underwriting with this idea we're going to sell water and pay the debt service on it. They would never issue us a bond. We would still have to have our ratepayers pay enough in rates to collect enough revenue to pay it. And then if we did sell water, then we'd be able to use that money to pay the debt service. That's what the board chose to do. So it's one of those things, it's just easier said than done. That is kind of what the voluntary agreement program is. Voluntary agreements with the Delta plan, part of that is kind of a water transfer. So we will be kind of receiving some water from there. But it would be very difficult for us. So for example, you have a water agency, they can move like 40,000 acre feet in 1 year. It'd be really, really, really difficult for us ever to get over 10,000 acre feet. In a year, we could actually make it happen.
So just going back to our question, does building Centennial increase your ability to do those water transfers?
I don't know. No, our issues have not been related to not having water in storage. It's related to when those reservoirs stop spilling. And Centennial and Rollins, once they're full, the spill's not going to be all that much different. They're still going to be spilling all at the same time. So we're still going to have those capacity issues. I think there was some thought before, and Chip would have to speak to this better than me, or Doug, you might know. They were also talking about building some huge pipelines down through the Delta, right?
They are.
No, not those pipelines, our own pipelines. Yeah, not the tunnels, our own pipeline to get through South Center.
Yeah, we had some preliminary discussions with regards to finding other ways to get out of the Bear River, to get out of the Bear River to get water.
You have to get out of the Bear River.
I think it's fair to say that building Centennial is not a an enabler to sell water.
It doesn't solve my problem. Yeah, it would enable you to possibly sell water in years maybe you wouldn't, because you'd have more storage to draw from. But it doesn't solve the fundamental problem of trying to sell it.
So what I'm hearing is the South Cuba Canal loses a lot of water. Have you looked at, if you fix that, what it would do to the shortage of water?
No, we haven't, because we haven't owned it for very long. But we have started conversations, and we're gonna start talking about the raw water master plan in the 5-year capital program on what do you do with the South Cuba Canal. You know, it's the sections that really require repair, or it's 14 miles long. It'd be very costly. Some, you know, you could start repairing it little by little. You start trying to take off the sections that are more prone to falling off the side of the cliff, more prone to rock fall. We'd have to take a look. I don't know that we've ever calculated, Chip.
As you're talking about unmet demand, you know, is that one of the options of addressing unmet demand by fixing?
It would help, but I don't think it wouldn't solve anything.
No, but that's part of
Yeah.
the overall discussion on the matrix we had before, right? Encasing canals, lining certain sections,
Yeah.
not necessarily the whole thing, but portions of them that obviously would impact and make more water available to get from point A to B.
All good ideas.
All right, carryover storage and immediate climate baseline demand. See, similar patterns between the strategic alternatives. Carryover storage and your dry hydrology, high demand. Obviously, everything's lower.
Or a quick question. Does anyone see a reason why we would do increased storage without doing the revised carryover and the water purchases? You do, would you do it all together? I mean, it'd be hard to sell that we need more storage if we haven't done those other two things, in my opinion.
Prior.
Yeah, I would just like to see that in the,
A combination.
yeah. I don't think that it's showing the real picture, 'cause in my opinion, and it's just me, I don't think that we would raise Rollins 10 feet without doing the revised carryover water purchase at the same time.
Well, and it's a very valid point, because even if you raise Rollins 50 or 10, 10 is probably, you're looking at 7 or 8 years minimum. 50, that's a big project.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably 15, 20 years, so you're right, you'd be doing those two other things too.
Maybe just a consideration.
Jen, when we looked at, I'm sorry, Trevor, you're done?
No, thank you.
You know, this idea that we could increase storage in Rollins some small amount with our existing water rights.
That's one of the things that we're looking at right now. So to build Centennial, we would be reliant upon receiving a water right that is currently held by the state of California.
Right.
So we have the application in for the state filed water right. That is a long process in that it's kind of more of a judicial proceeding where you have to resolve protests, and there's more opportunity for water extractions to be made through that process and through the issuance of a 401 certification. So in all likelihood, going for a new water rate, we speculate that they would take a larger water extraction. We have existing water rights at Rollins that are back of the napkin. We think we could use them even if we built the Rollins 50. That was very rudimentary back in the napkin. We're doing a much more in-depth analysis of that right now, so we can come up with some real answers. So as soon as we have that information, we'll bring it forth, because that is a very key to this whole conversation, because that, in my mind, you know, I start saying pros, cons, what helps the most, and if you don't have to get new water rights, because, yeah. But the other issue is with the Bay Delta Plan Basin update, there was an alternative that was included in the staff environmental document, that staff report we always refer to. And that, it was alternative 6A, and what it essentially said, and if it's selected, it says that the whole Sacramento Basin is over allocated with storage. So wouldn't it be likely that we could use that new storage, that new?
A new water right?
Yeah.
Right, they wouldn't give it, or they.
Yeah, or it'd come with huge extraction.
Right,
So, you know, you build a 100,000 acre foot reservoir,
you have to give them 50,000.
you get, well, yeah, whatever it is, whatever ends up being, we're just speculating, because we don't know what they're gonna come up with.
Yeah.
So, that, in that case, yes, using our existing water rights would be highly favorable to getting the project done.
And it is possible, but we don't have the data yet, the hard data.
We're doing more analysis, you know, it gets very complicated, and so we have to go through and run calculations and understand the water rate restrictions.
So the state overpromised something, huh?
Oh, ages ago.
Yeah.
I mean, this has gone on for,
It's the original Ponzi scheme.
yeah, it is.
It is.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm like full of questions today.
Because we haven't seen you in a while.
I should have called you, but, so, just an aside, because this is a question, but there's never an issue with PG&E delivering of water, like if you're in a drought, you know, situation, you know, we're talking about availability of water. I assume that PG&E water is always available.
Well, yes, under normal circumstances. We, however, happen to be at a perfect crossroads of bad stars that have occurred. Yeah, we're in a situation right now where we're unable to move any water down past Spalding. And that speaks a lot to kind of the infrastructure reliability piece. You know, we've been talking about the South Yuba Canal. Part of the South Yuba Canal that they still own fell off the side of the cliff. Now they have some emergency repairs. They're prohibiting them from moving water through the powerhouses. So, yeah, that is a very large risk. The consideration of when you can buy water, though, our modeling takes into account their system. So it gets analyzed into the same climate change hydrology.
So my question is, there was an article in the paper, Jennifer, and you were quoted as saying that if you raised Rollins 50 feet, there would be a moratorium during that building time on any new connection. So I just wanted to have a discussion about that.
I'm not sure about what article or where I was quoted. I have not been interviewed for article, but
It was somebody's interpretation.
yeah, but in reality,
I didn't dream it up.
it could have been.
No, I read it too.
I don't read anything, I do not read it if my face is in it.
I just wondered if that is a fact, that during that building, there would be a moratorium, if we can have a discussion on what that would look like.
The construction window.
Yeah, it has to do with the construction window, but I don't think it was I don't think it was that Rollins raised, I think it was the other one. Yeah.
It was the 50.
It was the Red Rollins.
Get it wrong like they normally.
I don't know, I'd have to read what it says. During construction, depending on to the degree you would have to get into the core of the dam, you'd have to drop the lake down.
Right.
So we would not be adding new connections during that time period. And we'd have, the board would have to make a decision, would that apply to both sides, would that apply just to the Rollins sides, what would we do?
How long a period was that?
Construction, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years, yeah,
By 3 to 4.
3 to 4 years.
Could be treated water or raw both.
These are all decisions that would be made after a thoughtful consideration. Treated water is never as big of a concern to us because of how little water use it is. One new connection, we don't even notice.
Right.
It's raw water, that would be
My
more the
question
concern.
is, how would it affect the general water customers during that period of time? That's an unknown question, right?
No, it would have affected.
It would have to be
I would think it's significantly.
significant for the part south of Rollins.
Yeah, the amount of analysis that's gone into raised Rollins is very limited at this point. So those are all things that would have to really be dived into before we kept moving forward.
Right.
And if, for example, and I think Director Calder, he had asked me this question, and it's very valid. If through the Bay Delta Plan update, if unimpaired flows go through, you're not building storage, you never fill it.
Right.
Right, so there's a lot of things going on right now that a storage project would be a slower roll if it was going to occur, because you have got to wait for the litigation and everything to play out with the Bay Delta Plan.
Because then it would be doubly as costly if, you know, on a per acre foot basis, if you built it.
It'd just be a waste of
half
money.
it.
It would be a
Yeah,
colossal waste of money. It'd be a,
Big wall in the
Yeah.
middle of the river.
you could just throw your water down into the delta with, or your money down in the delta with your water. Yeah, I know,
Right.
Oh, joy.
yeah.
Oh, joy.
All right, all good questions.
You know, since we have talked about extending the irrigation season to 2 weeks, and we know what the impact is on water availability and carryover storage, I would like to see, that included or reflected in the unmet demand numbers, because I think that there's general interest in doing that. I'd like to see the impact of that.
Well, it would
Add the
probably
numbers.
just increase our unmet demand.
Yeah, it just increases your unmet demand. It's
But
almost one
The
thing.
increase is how much water we buy from PG&E.
Yeah,
We likely have to buy the water to be able to support in the drier.
one of
Not
the,
necessarily.
yeah.
Not necessarily, but in the drier years.
Yeah, because there's still the limitations of how much we can buy,
But
when, how.
this chart is looking at unmet demand. You would almost have a whole other chart that said extend irrigation season. I think that the extension of the irrigation season, one of the things I heard was a super valid point previously, was that when people need additional irrigation is at different times of the year. Some people need it fall and some people need it in the spring. And some people, they need it a month later. It's not just a 2-week hard extension. I also think one thing we should take consideration of is micro storage on property, because then the agriculture.
They're in control.
Yeah, and they can use it how they need to use it, rather than us just randomly running dishes for them.
The other thing we don't know is what is that demand, right? We have no clue how many acres feet are we talking about for that period of time.
We
What's that?
did,
Right.
well, we did look at it, and it was pretty, the modeled estimates were pretty on target with Chip's guess, because it's
Yeah.
basically adding 2 weeks to what we know. What really influences how much water would actually be used is the weather. When it rains and how hot it is, and that will always influence it, yep.
Did he say 3,000?
So I don't know, we could show it, Karen, but I'm a little confused what you're trying to get to.
Well, if that's something we're gonna do, or that we're going to consider as an option, we should see it along with these other options.
These are to address unmet demand, that, it just doesn't fall in this suite of things.
Except that it increases unmet demand. Right? And it reduces the carry forward storage in our.
Yeah, we can show it, it's basically
It just
just
gets
additive,
worse than what
yeah, it's just worse.
Well, but, I mean,
It
to
just
me,
gets worse.
so what? It gets worse.
Well, it's not, it was almost a one to one.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It was like, what was it, 2,300 acre feet a week?
It's about 3,000,
6,000 a week?
3,000 a week.
2 weeks.
3,000.
6,000 for 2 weeks, okay, 3,000 a week.
1,000 ponds, 6 acre feet.
And that assumed that everybody was getting the extra 2 weeks. We didn't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we didn't try to take part of the folks and not have, everybody that was buying water continued to take demand for the next 2 weeks, even though they wouldn't necessarily do that, depending on who was using it.
What I'm hearing is that staff is not looking at this as a serious possibility.
What we did look at a serious possibility, my brain's having a hard time around putting it on this particular slide, because it's outside, it doesn't match with the alternatives. I would make a whole new slide. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see, because it says,
Yes.
it isn't one of these, it's something else.
To me, unmet demand.
Unmet demand.
November is unmet demand. I don't even think 2 weeks.
Jennifer is too perfect of a segue. No.
Well, yeah. There's just been very little conversation about it, that it's more, I think it's a little bit more complicated, but I'm happy to add
Well, we only hear.
whatever you want.
Only hear it in a dry fall, right?
Well, we don't hear it all that often, so but what we do hear is that some people would want it in the spring and some people would want it in the fall.
I think that's true, and I've brought that up in my farm.
Right.
Some springs I am desperate for water.
Yeah.
What if we created a case by case, because we don't have a room full of people sitting here saying we want water in the fall. I know the guy on my place had to turn the pump on the well and it rained the next day.
Right.
It's that kind of thing in the fall.
I guess I'm just saying, if this is a modeling that we have in play, and this is a summary of every modeling effort, I think, that we've had, and that one is not integrated into any of this. And I'm not saying we should do it or not do it, I'm just saying it's not here.
Yeah, and I don't see how it's any different than increased FERC flows, because really the shoulder months are a direct result of climate change, which is what we're modeling.
Yeah, I think it's just me, let me figure out the best way to present it. I'm just trying to figure out how to present it without it making this data.
My constituents is they would like both.
Mm-hmm.
They'll take either, and if you had to choose, they'd probably take fall.
Yeah, so 6 or 12,000.
Okay, so I think that's a fine approach, Jen. And I think looking at it more of what's the customer base that'll be interested in this, which is, as I think, part of what you were, planning to analyze. I just think right now there's a strong interest among certain constituents for this, and we need to better understand how many customers that really is, and maybe it's part of the infrastructure analysis that you're gonna be doing. It's not infrastructure, I know that, but I'm just saying
Maybe
that,
just try to Placer County.
we have this, we have done a very high level and simplistic look at that issue. And I would like to see more analysis and consideration of it, as you will also give to raising Rollins 10 feet and the other options we have.
The level of consideration will not be completed. That would need to substantiate doing that, it would not be part of the plan for water process. But if the board wants to do that as a side project, we can go ahead and start doing that. For me, it's just extra demand. The demand model already includes low, medium, high demand, and then we also added extra on top of that. We have a good handle of what it does to unmet demand. There's no additional need to model anything. I think we just need to, if the board wants to further explore it, we just need to move down that path of further exploring it.
Well, okay, so you're gonna slap me for this, but Karen, one of the other things, and I don't know if this is the vehicle, but this idea, and it's only an idea, about cutting back on these winter water deliveries or ending winter water. Now, I know that that's like a bad thing in the world talking about it, but it does take a lot of water, and there's not that many people that are serviced by it. So I would also like to see, if we were gonna go down a road, to see how ending winter water would impact our total unmet demand.
I would say that we be careful with the term winter water and talk about ag water and in-home.
Yes, agreed,
Two different
agreed, I
components.
know, there are two different
And
things, yes.
you guys are talking about limiting the in-home use, and the people
That's a whole different thing.
that are
Yeah.
really impacted, well, I guess you'd be impacted if you didn't have water in your house.
Yes, you would.
Minimize that. Flushing the toilet's important. It's two different conversations.
No, I agree, because I know we have to separate
And
those
I'm
out.
fully against stopping any winter water deliveries to any ag. In fact, it's in stark contrast to what we were just talking about of increasing the fall.
water often.
So that is another topic, in-home constructed conveyance water use.
Right, that's different than what I was thinking.
Well, that is something that has a lot of that is a long also process that is not gonna happen in the plan for water.
Right,
So
I get it.
if I'm hearing that the board would like to add, extending the irrigation season and looking at in-home water use to our list of items we're doing, we should do that. It just, that is way
It's not
beyond the
simple.
plan for water,
Right.
yeah.
I get it.
They're just very nuanced, very detailed,
That's correct.
there's a lot of things
Yeah,
going on.
you gonna go to the mutuals and tell them they can't flush their toilets anymore? I don't see it happening.
Wow, you would have to come up with an alternative water source, and could you do it? You know, what do? Put tanks down? The issue with constructive conveyance, there's two issues. One, we'd like to get raw, non-potable water out of people's homes.
Yes.
But the second thing is, we do have some very long runs of canals that we have to run a ton of water just for 6 in-home water users. And it's the length of the canal that's the problem, because you have to move so much water to even get down to them. So in those situations, is there opportunities for, we have a grant program for on-site storage, so we don't have to run the canals. Does that save water? But there's a whole slew of legal issues that involves that, and
Right.
we have to identify where those canals are, and which ones you would tackle first, and which ones make the most sense. It's just something that's way outside of the level of detail we're gonna do in the plans for water.
I understand, but I just had to sort of bring it up to put a cog in the works.
I think everyone's trying to add meetings.
No more plan for water.
Not the, so, I wouldn't assume that this hasn't been worked on,
Right.
and it is being worked on. That, and Jennifer said it, you know, if people had on-site storage, it mitigates everything. And our place is the living proof of that. So, let's just say, story doesn't end today. There might be more news in a few weeks.
Rich is liking the on-site storage. It does alleviate some problems with extending of the irrigation
And it helps with
season.
fire.
Yeah.
It's mitigated everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it depends. It may, but those are all the things you gotta look at. What makes the most sense to do? Is it just simply extending irrigation on both ends? Is it giving people on-site storage? Is it certain users on certain canals? Is it ranchers? Who is it? You know, we had a conversation today about hardwood trees. So there's a lot of things to look at. We will document our work on the extension of the water season, and we'll talk more about it, but those things aren't gonna be completely answered. Okay,
Thank you.
but we're happy to charge forward and look at it.
Charging to the word. Right.
Okay.
Next steps, thanks for your patience.
So, next steps, final analysis of storage options. I think that just means kind of writing up everything we've talked about, right? And then finalize recommendations for the options matrix. In other words, we're getting towards the end.
So a lot of the things we talked about today are gonna be fleshed out more. We're doing a lot more homework now related to the, water rights in Rollins, some of these larger issues we've talked about. So stay tuned on when we're gonna schedule the next meeting, because we're trying to get a lot of little puzzle pieces together right now.
Amazing work. Thank you.
And then it'll all be wrapped up in a final report.
Pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah, to the staff as well, and management team, it's really been a remarkable effort. And, you know, when I talk to people about, at least from my point of view, coming from Dumbo land of climate change and really what it means to our area, to where I feel.
Where we are now.
I do not feel. But also realizing the importance of this issue and really the leadership and the community participation has been really exceptional. I really appreciate everyone.
And we have one question regarding timelines. We will report back. We're on what the timeline is for wrapping everything up.
Schedule all the meetings first. Any final,
It's been 2 years. All right.
final,
Any number of meetings we need.
yeah. Any more comments? Could you just repeat what you just?
any number of meetings, I know, right?
Look, there's so much fun.
I was, joking, hopefully only one or two more meetings.
I think that's sort of like, what does it look like?
Right, so, Jared just reviewed it, we're trying to wrap everything up. I'm a little hesitant to commit to a timeline at this moment because we are looking more in depth at certain items, so, and we do have our hands full with a couple of major issues right now that we're managing, so we might be a little behind.
Our eye on the calendar.
Keep your eye on the calendar, and we also, if you're not signed up for the Plan for Water email list, do so. We disseminate information through there, and anyone is also, always feel free to reach out to me directly.
So going once, twice, we're adjourned.